Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Conversations with Dené, your family law and wellness needs. We are here for our mediation session, Mediating for Success. And our guest today is Janis Jones. I'm Dené Matthews of the Dunn Matthews Law Firm. We are a boutique law firm in Metro Atlanta, and I started this series as a way to educate, empower, and elevate those who are in the midst of a family court litigation or just looking to make yourself a better co-parent along the way. And so today, like I indicated, we will be talking about mediation. Janis is a mediator, an arbitrator, and an attorney here in Metro Atlanta. She has been doing so for over 20 years. So she brings us a wealth of knowledge being a mediator. She has been a judge. And I particularly love Janis. She has mediated quite a few of my cases over the course of the past few years. And I love the way that she is careful with the parties, that she doesn't push them to make any form of agreements that is not going to be in their best interest. And she really, really has the collaborative approach down pat, if you ask me. And so without further ado, I will bring on Janis Jones.
Hello.
Hello, Janis. Thank you for coming and joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. So can you just kind of start off and give our viewers just a little bit of background about who Janis is? How did you get started in mediation in particular, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So I initially, of course, just like every other attorney, was very excited about litigating and getting in there into the courtrooms. And I did that for a while. And then I realized that even sometimes when you win, you don't really win. There's a lot of cost associated with litigating. It's a lot of stress associated with litigating, and all the unpredictable outcomes that you can have and things you just can't control. That really made me realize I think there's a better way of actually reaching resolution. And then particularly as I started practicing more in family law is really more designed, I think, to help people resolve on their own for mediation, really, rather than litigating. Courts are really not, I don't think, the best place to deal with emotional issues and emotional pains that you have when you're dealing with divorce actions, for example, or custody cases. So mediation really was a great opportunity for me, I think, to kind of transition what I learned in litigating, and also the period that I spent as a state court judge, giving an opportunity to help people have a perspective about resolving cases on their own.
And so I am fond of resolving cases on your own because the judge that's in front of you only is going to hear, an hour, 6 hours, and the very rare multiple day trial, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know the ins and outs of what your life entails and what it has entailed and what it's going to take. And so their own personal opinions come in and all of that. So I'm a huge
Absolutely.
fan of being able to mediate. And so what do you think in particular, what are some main reasons, or just give us a few reasons as to why someone should choose mediation over litigation?
Well, the main thing I always tell parties at the beginning of mediation is, in this process, you can say whatever you like and present whatever you like and have your thoughts and concerns considered in a way that you may not necessarily be able to do before a court. That, to me, is one of the most important benefits, because judges are limited by the law. They're going to follow the process, and they're going to be following procedures, evidence rules. You don't have any of that in mediation. And so you get a chance to really have those issues that are important to you, those perspectives that are important to you, considered. Because trust me, if those positions or concerns do not fit exactly into the law, the judge won't hear it. They won't waste any time with it. And so you may feel like your position or your concerns are not even being heard. So mediation, you get that opportunity to be heard. It gives you a voice for whatever your personal issues may be, whether it's something personal with you or particularly when you have children in a custody case, to get that perspective out. I think the other thing is just control. Again, that unpredictable nature of going to court, you might end up with something that is completely opposite of what you thought might happen. And then you just have to live with it. Whereas you come to mediation, you can control the outcome. You've kind of bought into what the outcome is and the cost. You can control the cost a whole lot more. You can get your case resolved in a matter of months sometimes versus the years that it can take litigating and getting your evidence together and going to court, and the cost associated with all of that. So
yeah, and I kind of I tell people all the time, tell my clients all the time that the judge is human. I'm human, you're human, the judge is human.
Yep.
I might wake up on Monday and I'm feeling fantastic. I wake up on Tuesday and my spouse pissed me off when I rolled over, or my kids were just not doing what they were supposed to be doing, or whatever. And that more than likely is going to roll over into my day. The decisions that I make, the demeanor that I have, and it's judges are human, so it's the same thing. And why place your fate and the fate of your family in the hands of another individual? It just, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because judges have a purpose, absolutely. But
Correct.
if you can be, the deciding factor over your own life and well-being, why not do that?
Exactly. And particularly when you have children, you have to remember that judge is an independent party or independent person that is not invested in your situation, in your interest, in your outcome in the same way. They're looking at the law and how your facts fit the law. Everything else is really not necessarily their primary concern. And so you have to take that under consideration. Do you want this person that doesn't know you, has no interest in your future, making decisions about you, your finances, your outcome, your children? So you have to think about it like that.
Agreed. And I think I've found that a lot of my clients who, when we enter into mediation and they're thinking, this is pointless, we're not going to reach a resolution, my spouse, my ex-boyfriend, my ex-girlfriend, whatever, is just not the type of person where we can come to an agreement about anything. And generally, I say a good mediator can help you get to letter Z. Like they can help you get to the end.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say, that a mediator, that's really what our role is. Our role is not to just take everything back and forth that someone is saying. Our role is to actually present that information in a way that's going to promote resolution, talk through alternatives with the parties, kind of give a reality, because sometimes people think they want something until you get a reality of what that really will look like. In terms of your everyday routines, that may not really be what you really want. And so the mediator is there to kind of help you talk through that, come up with some solutions, get some good language that will address your concerns that maybe a judge would never consider. And because of that, if a mediator is able to help a party understand that as a benefit, they'll come to the table ready to agree. So it's not uncommon at the beginning of mediation when I hear parties say, "Oh, we're not going to agree," and then a few hours later, everybody's agreeing, and they're like, "Thank you so much," and they're done with their case. So.
Yeah, and sad to admit, but I even sometimes walk in thinking, "Oh, good Lord." I know my client needs resolution today, but I don't know how we're going to do it. And I need help to help my client figure it out and to help me, put things out in the atmosphere that are going to resonate with the other party. So they're not thinking that my client just wants to be difficult, or my client isn't, willing to work with them, or what have you. And today, perfect example, I said, oh my gosh, I just don't know. And based off of previous correspondences, and at the end of the day, it was a 4.5 hour mediation, and the parties walked away with a full agreement. Their child is going to be taken care of moving forward, and the money has stopped. Right? They're not going to have continuous incurring fees and things of that nature, and
Exactly.
they've been able to make decisions for themselves that's going to benefit their kid.
Right.
And
Well,
so I like to
I
go
was just
ahead.
going to say one thing about that is, the mediator's role is different than the attorney's role, because
Mm-hmm.
your role is to advocate and to put forth your client's position. And
Right.
so there are things as a mediator I can say that the attorney can't necessarily say. So because I am, and so that's why sometimes, even though the attorney doesn't think resolution is possible, the mediator is able to reach that resolution, because
Yeah.
I'm there to not advocate one side over another. I'm not, even though I'm an attorney, I am very open in telling people this is not my role today. My
Mm-hmm.
role is to facilitate a discussion, and I am here to help you get an understanding of what is important moving forward, and that
Mm-hmm.
we're going to stay forward focused. We're going to, what do you need from this day forward to get yourself in the position that you need, either as a parent or as a divorced party, whatever that may be. So.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, at least I think, that being able to go into mediation, and whether it's a full agreement or that
Mhm.
you've reached a partial agreement, and maybe we'll get into that a little later, but I think it builds a level of confidence in someone and in the ability for them to be able to work together. If we reached a resolution today, then tomorrow, you know, will be that much better, and next month and next year. What are your thoughts
Absolutely.
about that?
Well, mediation is very empowering. Um, like I said, it gives you a voice. Sometimes in the midst of just two parties talking with one another, there's so many other things going on. The dynamic of your relationship, other people, whether they're family or whatever, having a voice. And so sometimes your own personal position can get lost. Well, in mediation, you get a chance to kind of take control of that. And you say, no, this is my voice. This is what I'm going to negotiate. This is kind of what I see as important. And so
Mm-hmm.
that can be a very empowering process. Allowing a judge or other individuals to kind of make those decisions for you, kind of leave you dealing with consequences of somebody else's decisions. And that's not always a fun position to be in. Actually, in fact, I think it's never a good position to be in. You always want to be the one that is making decisions for yourself, and then you can be comfortable living out the consequences of those decisions. And so it's a very empowering process, I find, for a lot of people.
And I don't know if this was the word that you used earlier, but walking out of the courtroom can sometimes feel more like a defeat if you're not on the side that, seemed to be successful. Whereas when you're walking out of mediation, hopefully both people are walking out just feeling
Right.
good.
Right. I
Feeling
think
good.
many times with litigation, what happens is nobody's satisfied with the result.
Yeah.
It's not really a win,
It is
so to
not
speak.
at
And
all.
so you rarely get everything that you want.
Hmm.
Rarely. I want to
Yeah.
be clear about that. And so if you're not going to get everything you want anyway, then why not let that outcome be something you negotiated versus
Hmm.
somebody telling you what you're not going to get and what you are going to get. And so I think it's important to come in to mediation with that mindset that okay, I'm here to negotiate. I may not get everything I want, but it's going to cost me less money. It's going to be more time, and I am invested in seeing what my future looks like.
And mediation isn't just for people with kids, right? I
No,
mean, we mediate divorces that don't involve children. We can mediate legitimation cases, child support modifications. The door is wide open.
absolutely. And all of those things apply even in, let's say, a child support modification case. You have some interest and concerns in how that child support is being calculated and what is being included in that. Is daycare going to be included in this, or is it better for us to have a separate provision about daycare that's not going to be calculated as part of my child support? How can we negotiate that, and how can we work that out?
Hmm.
Particularly when you have a child that's like 4 years old, that's going to be starting kindergarten soon,
Right.
the daycare amount's going to change drastically because you're only paying after school. So how do we address that and get that kind of addressed with the child support determination? So
Right.
we can always negotiate, and there's always room for mediation to be a benefit to parties, no matter what type of case it is.
So, like, how often would you say that you see people settle? You're at mediation, and at the end of the day, whether that's a partial agreement or a full agreement, how often would you say people settle?
I say about 70% of the time, actually. And let me kind of go into what a partial, because you mentioned that
Yeah.
partial agreement versus a full agreement. In mediation, you don't have to agree on everything. Let's say that, you've reached an agreement. Let's say it's a divorce with children. So you've reached an agreement on how you're going to address the house and all of those financial situations. And you've actually agreed on your parenting plan, but we're stuck on the child support amount and how we want to handle that. Well, you can just reach an agreement on the issues of dividing the property and on your parenting plan and how you're going to co-parent. And then you can say, okay, we'll just go to court on this limited issue and let the judge kind of look at that.
Right.
Um, and that will streamline some costs. It limits the issues for the court. The judges are usually very happy
Yeah.
when issues are limited. So even if you can't reach an agreement on everything, you can still do a partial agreement.
Yeah.
So that is available to people as well.
Yeah, I actually like mediation for that reason because yes, there may be some things that we are probably going to fight tooth and nail about, maybe, but then there's those other things that we just know. We know we are great co-parents, so we know what's going to happen with our kid. But then when it comes to, how much equity someone's going to get out of a home or
Exactly.
what's going to happen to our retirement accounts, maybe we haven't had the time to fully flesh out those numbers, or maybe there's a disagreement on how those numbers need to be divided. And then we can either one, go to court, or we can take our time and have a second mediation. How
Correct.
often would you say that you've had people come back for a second round?
If they've reached a partial, it really just depends. I think if it's a situation where they don't have enough information to reach an
Mm-hmm.
agreement on everything, those second mediations can tend to be very, very beneficial. Because really what you're saying is, look, I don't have enough information to make an agreement about the financial parts of this divorce, but we, like you said, we know what we're going to do with the kids, so let's do that, and then we will come back again in another month or 2 months, and we will finalize everything with respect to the finances. It gives people an opportunity to do things like get an appraisal done. If you don't know how much is in your 401k, or if you don't know how much of that 401k was a marital portion, it gives you an opportunity to identify that. And so it just gives you a chance to clarify whatever issues it was that you weren't able to agree about, to come back and then try to have a second bite at it and see if you can go ahead and reach an agreement.
Gotcha. Makes sense. That makes sense. So, for someone who might be thinking about starting the process of divorce or custody case or what have
Mhm.
you, and they're considering, this sounds good, I think mediation is something that I should probably think about. What
Mhm.
are some things that you think they need to consider prior to coming to the mediation table?
The first thing they need to consider is information. Do I have enough information to actually reach an agreement? Particularly in divorce cases, you need to have an idea of what it is that you're dividing out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are my assets? And I think it's good from both sides. It's not just a situation where I don't know what we have, so I need to find out. But a lot of times people come in with an idea that, well, I think they're hiding millions of dollars. Like, y'all have been living pretty average all along, but somehow somebody got $1 million hid somewhere.
Right.
So getting the information together will help
Yeah.
basically set your expectation. And you need to have the proper expectation when you come into mediation. If your expectation is too far out from where I can bring you in to meet, then
Mm-hmm.
the mediation is just not going to work. And in just 3 hours, I'm not going to be able to bring you from way out on one side into a middle place of agreement.
Yeah.
So having realistic expectations really begins with knowing what we're dealing with and what we need to address. Even in the context of a custody case or like a legitimation situation, you need to have some understanding of what it is you want. For
Yes.
example, I want 50-50 parenting time. Well, what does that look like?
Yes.
Is that every, you go Sunday to Sunday, week on, week off, or are you talking about splitting the week? And what is it that you're thinking you're going to be able to do? Also understanding the reality of, if you live far apart from each other, it's going to be difficult transitioning that child,
Right.
particularly if you're trying to do it in the middle of the week. So just thinking about that aspect of, what is it that I specifically want? How is this going to work in my life on a day-to-day basis? Those kind of things you have to think about before you really start. And then after that, I think one other thing is, am I willing to compromise? Is there, you start out with, ultimately, this is what I want. Is there anything within getting an all or nothing perspective that I'm willing to do? And if you can come to that place, then you can come to mediation ready to at least have a mediator talk to you about some
Yeah.
alternatives.
Because if you're not willing to compromise, what's
It's
the
not going
point?
to work.
What's the
Right.
point?
There
You
is a
know?
provision that talks about good faith mediation. You
Hmm.
have to come to the table in good faith, willing to negotiate. If you're
Yeah.
not willing to do that and you're like, I'm doing this and nothing else, that's really not a good faith position of negotiating. You
Hmm.
have to be willing to kind of, okay, pick and choose what your deal breakers are,
Hmm.
and understand that everything is not a deal breaker. There are some things that are not going to be worth the extra money of going to court, the unpredictable nature of
So
going
very
to
true.
court. You have to be willing to at least listen to that aspect of your case.
And it's funny that you bring up some things aren't worth going to court, because you talked about you have to know what you want, right? And that's one question I ask people all the time, just during a consult. Like, what do you want? And if you can't tell me at a minimum what you want, you just know that you want a divorce and you want to move out. Well, what about all the money and time that you've invested? Or I know I want to legitimate my kids, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get any time with them. Well, that's the whole point. That's the reason you came here. So how much time do you want
Mm-hmm.
in your mind? And knowing that, and then knowing that I might have to bend a little,
Exactly.
sometimes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then no, being willing to say at the end of the day, even though I wanted joint physical and this person over here wants primary physical, I see that a lot end up being that like tail end thing. And for me, it's, does it matter?
Mm-hmm.
Does it really matter? Is it worth 4 more months? Is it worth 3 more months? If you've got the time that
Exactly.
is practically joint physical, it's just not the words. Does it really matter? So I think it's really important that you bring up just knowing what you want,
Exactly.
and considering the pros and the cons of everything.
Exactly. I think too, another important piece is to be forward focused. I think you have to be willing to say, I know that you guys have had difficulty in the past. That's why you're here. Okay, that
Yes.
so the question then becomes, what is it going to look like going forward? What do you need? If it's a divorce, what do
Mm-hmm.
you need? What kind of if you know that you're going to have to move out of the home, what are
Mm-hmm.
you going to need to make that happen effectively and peacefully?
Yes.
And then also, if it's with a child, what are you going to need in terms of child support, for example? If you're
Mm-hmm.
the custodial parent, what is it that we're talking about in terms of what the law allows, because we do have to follow that.
Mm-hmm.
But then, we have to talk about those other aspects, particularly when you have the non-custodial parent is out of state. There's going to be travel expenses and things like that that a court will consider that will reduce your child support amount. So you have to balance what's available to you in mediation versus what is available in court, and keep it all focused on what I need going forward.
Totally agree. Now, what about the person who might be listening and they are thinking, I can't even get an attorney. because that's an additional expense, or I can't, or I don't want to. But mediation still sounds amazing. It sounds like something that's going to benefit me.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an option for them?
Absolutely. There are a lot of people who do things like pre-suit mediation. So what that means is you get an opportunity to mediate with your spouse, or with the other party. Excuse me, it may not be a divorce, but to mediate with them and get the issues done, and then you can just have those documents. Take it to an attorney, have them draft it out, and just file that, and then you're done. You don't necessarily have to start litigating before you actually mediate. So I've done a lot of pre-suit mediations with individuals who they say, well, I'll say this too. A lot of times people say, we have an agreement. We've already
No,
talked about everything.
the good old I have an agreement.
Right. But what I found is that what you heard and what the other person heard, y'all really don't agree.
There's no agreement.
It's other than just to separate or to, whatever that you're going to do. So I think that mediating also helps to clarify your agreements. Even if you already have an agreement, there's a whole lot of things you may not have thought about that are really going to help you make your co-parenting plan move smoothly, or your divorce move smoothly, particularly if there's a move out situation where one party's moving out. Helping that transition move a lot smoother, a mediation can get language in there that'll help that process. So
I think a lot of people may not realize the benefits to mediating. I mean, there's so many benefits. I've seen people add in family reunions to their parenting plans. I like the whole nine.
Well, I can tell you an interesting one, and that is about hair. For African American women particularly, hair is an issue. I will tell you now, the courts are not going to put in a hair provision in your parenting plan.
Absolutely not.
But the reason why it's important is because I have mediated issues where there's the non-custodial parent does not know how to deal with the child's hair, and mom is, or the custodial parent is very big on natural hair, and the non-custodial parent puts a perm in the hair or does something to change the curl pattern of that child's hair, and then it just all goes awry. So having a hair provision or hair provision languages is things that we can do in mediation. Food plans, you have, I don't want the child eating too much sugar and things like that. I've done a whole mediation on a food and nutrition plan for the child that they were trying to get the parents to agree to.
It's all within reason though, right?
Yes, of course.
All within reason.
Yeah, and I'll say this. It's got to make sense, and it's got to be enforceable. Yes. So it can't be something that's so far out the box that it's not enforceable. But if both parents agree that they want to okay, we need to have a hair plan, okay, we can address that. And so remember, if you're the party that's insisting on some language, then there's probably going to be some requirements on you and some obligations on you with respect to that. Right. So, those are things in mediation we can do that, trust me, judges are not going to take any time to do. The law doesn't provide that, doesn't require it. So therefore, they're not going to deal with it.
No requirement whatsoever. Now, when people come, do you prefer, or any mediator, is it preferred that they come prepared with everything already listed out? Or does it just require it being in your brain and actually being able to verbally express your desires?
So I think that depends on the individual. I do think it always helps to have it written out because you need to kind of see it, particularly, and I'll say this, if you're a party and you're looking for alimony. I think having an understanding of what you need, I think people always think they need more money than they really, really need. So having your budget written out, or what we call a financial affidavit, in front of you, having some understanding of what my financial situation is will always help. I think too, having already sat down and talked through some alternatives, I think is also beneficial. And so maybe having that written out, what are some alternatives for myself? It's very difficult in mediation to try to negotiate when you don't have for yourself a frame of reference of what you need
Yeah.
and what it is that you're looking for.
True.
Everybody wants to get everything, but very rarely ever does one party get everything. That doesn't happen. Even when there's been bad behavior on one party, that just doesn't happen that way. So
Yeah.
you have to be willing to consider an option other than I get everything. So.
Agreed. And I think too, just making sure that you have it written down or in bullet points or something
Mhm.
helps you to make sure that you're not walking away like, I think I forgot something.
Right,
And then you're
that's true.
sitting in bed one night and you say, oh my gosh, I forgot. Because we can't go backwards.
Correct. I think too, particularly in divorce cases and your furniture or personal property items, if there's something important to you, an heirloom that you think is an heirloom or something like that, you need to write that down, because if it's not on the list and
Yeah.
you are separating and you want to go back to get that, if the other person does not want to do that, you don't get it. I don't
It's
care
a
how
wrap.
important or how valuable you believe it is to you. So, particularly when you're talking about dividing personal property items or furniture or things like that, you need to have a list of those things. You really do. Take an inventory of your home, take an inventory of those things that are important to you,
Yes.
and make sure you have those on a list. And again, be willing to negotiate on those things. I tell people when we get to the end of divorce, I'm not going to let y'all fuss about pots and pans. We're not going to do that. So be willing to give up the pots.
Yes.
I know you may have just purchased them, but be willing to
Yeah.
give up the pots to be done.
Agreed. Agreed. So last thing, someone
Mhm.
asked, and she said this is great information, by the way. Is there ever a time when the couple says, this is more than I thought? This is just a lot. And they then decide, maybe we'll just work on our marriage. Have you ever had that
Absolutely.
happen?
Absolutely. And I've actually done plans, or I don't know how you would actually call it, but therapy plans. So what that means is what we are going to agree to is we're going to agree to hold off on proceeding with this divorce for 90 days. And in that 90 days, this is what we're going to do. We are going to do therapy at this place. We're going to split the costs of the therapy. I will be the one to set up the appointment within the next 10 days. So I actually write out a plan and for the parties to follow during that time. And then at the end of the 90 days, if you want to continue with your divorce action, you can. Otherwise, you can dismiss it. But I've done those kind of plans, and I also have had the complete plan of, I don't really want to do this. I think I really want to stay married, and I go and I express that to the other party. My role as a mediator is to take whatever proposal the other party has. And even if that proposal is let's stay together, I'll work on it. I will be the voice of that person in that other room and say, hey, they really want to work this out. They want to keep their family. Is there anything that you would be willing to do or to consider to allow that to happen? And that's all. I've done that many times.
And I'll say that I've had people do that before we even get to the mediation table.
Mm-hmm.
They're in counseling or trying to figure it out, and they decide, "Well, we're going to just try to work this out." And so I think mediation sometimes, once we get there, makes it seem all the more real,
Mm-hmm.
and
I
it
agree.
brings the realization that this is probably, it's ending, and I've got to do something about it.
Yes,
um
I've had a mediation. We got all the way to the end, and one of the parties stared at the paperwork and she said, I just didn't think this was happening this quick. And she took the papers and ripped them up and she said, I'm not ready. And she said, maybe he and I can work it out.
yeah,
So, I think, it's the mediation is kind of where the rubber meets the road kind of thing. And you really do begin to evaluate all aspects of your situation, including, resolving it even on your own outside of even mediation. Sometimes I've had a situation where I had a party say, hey, can you see if the other party will speak with me privately? And I asked them and they say yes, and everybody leaves, the attorney, the mediators, everybody. And they come out and they've, done their own resolution. So there's always
I
those
like it.
opportunities.
It has, again, vast majority of benefits.
Yes. And I'll say this, as the mediator, I'm not invested in your outcome. I'm invested in the process. I want to make sure that you have a good experience in the process of mediation, but I'm not there. And that's why I don't pressure people to say you need to resolve. The outcome is yours, not mine. So I'm not invested in that. So, but I do want to make sure that you are making informed decisions, whatever that decision is.
Agreed. So before you go, do you have any resources, advice for people to kind of get them starting to look into their mediation life?
Sure. So one resource that is really good in Georgia, there's an organization called the Georgia Office of Dispute Resolution. So they kind of govern mediation for all of the courts and really all court-connected cases in Georgia. But they have a resources tab on their website, which is godr.org. And you can click on that resources tab and they have some self-help forms. They have some videos about mediation. They have some guidelines. Mediations now are all being done virtual pretty much, which is a new platform for us.
I'm loving it.
The pandemic kind of pushed us into that way of technology. So they have a guide for how to handle mediation virtually. And believe it or not, it actually works really well. I was kind of skeptical at first. How in the world are you going to be able to do that virtually? But it actually works fine. We're able to talk and I'm able to reason with people in the same exact way as I would as if we were meeting in person. So, and there's ways that you can keep the confidentiality. You won't be on the same screen at the same time. So all of that information is on the website to kind of give you some familiarity with the process, as well as if you're interested in a pre-suit mediation and you want to find a mediator, there's a tab on there to find a neutral. And you can look at different people and their backgrounds on there too.
So where do they find you? If they say, I like Janis, Janis seems amazing. She is amazing. But how do they find you?
So the best thing to do is just to email me. You can email me at janiscjones365 That's Janis C. Jones 365 @gmail.com. And, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to. I'll just respond back to you. Email is the best way for me, and I'm able to respond pretty quickly back to you and answer any questions that you may have. And again, if you want to do any pre-suit mediations, I'm available for that also.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you again, Janis, for joining us today. It was a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you at another mediation.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Have a great evening.
You too. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us again on another episode of Conversations with Dené, your family law and wellness needs. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you are notified each and every month when we run our live series, as well as every week we post videos giving tips and tricks on family law and your overall well-being. The next 2 months, we will be focusing mostly on children, and as they transition back into schools, their anxiety levels may be rising. They've been out of school for 1.5 years, which is quite a long time for some children. And so we will be focusing a lot of our videos and posts over the next 1.5 to 2 months on mediation and children anxiety levels, how to help them, how to transition yourself as a parent back into having your children back at school and dealing with that. Make sure that you follow us on YouTube, Instagram, all of those good things. We're on all the platforms. And if you are in need of any form of legal service, divorce, custody, child support, legitimation, be sure to reach out to us at 770-686-3092, as well as our website, www.dunmatthewsfirm.com, and we'll be more than happy to assist you. Have a great evening.